I started an IVF journey over a year ago. I wanted to ease my fertility fears. I wanted a backup plan. I wanted some insurance in case my husband and I couldn't get pregnant naturally. I got married when I was 33. I wanted a year alone with my husband to go through our honeymoon period. But now I'm in a rush to get pregnant. I come from a big family. My mom has 5 kids. I have 16 nieces and nephews, and I want at least 2 kids. Ideally, I want 4, but I don't know if that's possible for me. So here's what I wish I would have known walking into my doctor's office on day 1. Don't count your eggs. You'll see your doctor more than most boyfriends. It's gonna cost you. Get ready for disappointment. It is not a science, and you better be comfortable with needles. In short, eggs, doctors, money, disappointment, uncertainty, and needles. Before I jump in, I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. This is not a peer-reviewed journal. This is my personal experience from one woman to help other women understand the roadblocks that they're going to face and to get in a better mental headspace so that you can make a better decision up front about whether or not you want to do IVF, to navigate the journey so that you are in a better mental place every step along the journey. Eggs. This is probably what most women who don't know much about IVF want to know. How many eggs do I need? How many can I get? How long will it take? Ladies, don't count your eggs. 80% of them won't hatch. A year ago, I did my first extraction. After weeks of taking medications and injections and blood tests, which I'll talk about later, I went in and went under anesthesia to get some of my eggs vacuumed out. When I woke up from surgery, my doctor came in and she was thrilled. She told me that she had gotten out 25 eggs. I was over the moon, and I wish they hadn't told me. I ended up with 5 embryos from those 25 eggs and just 1 pregnancy, and that's not uncommon. Here's why. There's a series of steps and processes along the way to get to a viable embryo. Think of it like a funnel, and every step of the way, you'll be disappointed. For me, I started out with 25 eggs, and only 14 of them were mature, meaning that they were big enough and developed enough. And so 9 of them got thrown out right away. Then they put my husband's sperm on the eggs, and only 11 of them accepted it. So another 3 in the trash. Then they let them grow for about a week to get to the blastocyst stage. And 3 more did not grow and mature. So now I'm down to 8 eggs. Then they did DNA testing, which I'm so grateful that they can do this because it moves that piece of the uncertainty and disappointment earlier. So despite getting 25 eggs, I had to do a second extraction because we had 2 failed embryo transplants. And the second extraction went well. We got 30 eggs. And I gotta tell you, I felt so guilty because in the recovery room, there was a woman next to me, and I overheard the nurse talking to her, and the nurse told her she got 8 eggs. So at that rate, she would have had to do 6 extractions to get as many as I did from 2 to have peace of mind. So we do the whole process again, and from these 30, 10 were immediately thrown out for not being big enough. 5 more didn't accept my husband's sperm. 7 lived for a week into the blastocyst stage. And then we had to wait 2 weeks for genetic testing. So we ended up with 6 embryos. And you guys, if you also want to make sure that you have a girl and a boy, that's another factor, because on average, 50% of each. So there is a chance that you could end up with all one gender. So out of 55 eggs, I may only get 3 babies. I may only get 1. Another anecdote, Kourtney Kardashian froze her eggs. She froze 7 eggs and none of them survived the thaw. So talk about a complete waste of time and money and a complete disappointment. And I've talked about the embryo. So in order to have an embryo, you have to have an egg and a sperm. And so if you're at the point in your life where you are not with a lifetime partner, you're not married, you're not sure about the guy you're with, and you only want to have eggs, you don't want to say, this guy's definitely going to be the father of all my children, then you only freeze the eggs, and they then have to go through a thawing process years down the line when you're ready to have a baby, which is another step in that funnel. So it is even more dangerous, or you're more likely to be disappointed and have more not viable eggs if you're freezing eggs versus if you're able to do it with an embryo with a man that you want to be the father of your children. A little bit about medications. Your body goes through a roller coaster of hormones in the IVF process. Each woman is born with about 1 million eggs in her ovaries. And you can't just go in and suck up those baby eggs. You have to get them to a certain maturity state before they're ready to go through the rest of the process. So for weeks, you take oral medications and injections in order to trick your body into going into hyperovulation to mature multiple eggs instead of just 1 egg per month, which is the point of your monthly menstrual process. Ready to be terrified by a graph? Here is your egg count by age. Anthropologically, age 20 to 30 is the optimal time for you to get pregnant. In real life, you need to have a solid financial foundation and ideally also a committed life partner to raise this child with you. And for a lot of people, that doesn't happen by 25, it doesn't even happen by 30. But at 32, your fertility starts to drop off a cliff. By age 40, it's very difficult to get pregnant, and by age 50, it's almost impossible. On that note, let's talk about disappointment. The biggest thing I wish I'd been told on day one was get ready for disappointment. Other women will get more eggs than you. Not all of your eggs will turn into a pregnancy like we've discussed. Your body won't be ready for procedures on some months. It will probably be a long road to having a baby in your arms and a lot of losses along the way. 1 month, my uterine lining was measuring at a 6 and they wanted it to be a 7. I don't know if it's like millimeters, centimeters. I just know that I was barely off. And so they decided not to implant that month. And so I wasted a month. It can take more than a month to prep for any given procedure, whether it's extracting eggs or implanting an embryo or other procedures that you might have to go through in order to increase your chances of getting pregnant. Which brings us to uncertainty. Guys, this is not a science. My doctor is fantastic. Between her undergrad, her medical degree, and her residency, she went to Stanford, Harvard, and Johns Hopkins. Literally like the best 3 schools, particularly for medicine. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard out of her mouth, I don't know, or let's just try again. I've had various medication cocktails, including vaginally inserting Viagra in order to increase my blood flow. And I've also had to go through painful, time-consuming, and expensive procedures to increase my chances of a successful pregnancy. A lot of doctors will troubleshoot in a different order, or they'll decide to escalate to different treatment options at different times. It's subjective. For me, it started with a camera up my vagina. This was after 1 egg extraction and 2 failed transplants. And I was also 36. So my doctor had a reason to suspect that I had fertility issues. Being 36, I was already halfway down that steep slide to infertility. And the procedure is called a hysteroscopy. So they stick a camera up your vagina and look around. And I was anesthetized for this. And my doctor found scar tissue in my uterus. Now, fortunately, she was able to clean up the scar tissue within the same appointment. I'm not sure that that's always an option, so that's like something that could delay your pregnancy. What causes scar tissue? Guess what? They don't know. Uncertainty. So she decided to also do a second procedure, and let's take a peek at your fallopian tubes. And this was where they insert dye into your tubes. I'll probably do like a longer video just about this in particular because it was quite the process to see if there's anything abnormal. And this I was not anesthetized for, and it was super painful. And when it came back, guess what? One tube looks kind of abnormal. So they decided that they would recommend surgically removing one of my fallopian tubes, just in case it helps. And neither my fertility doctor, my gynecologist, or the third doctor who actually did the surgery could actually explain why it would help. They just said it's something about the environment that if something's abnormal, it might throw everything off. It might be leaking fluid, it might wash the embryo out, lots of uncertainty. And the disappointing part was it was about 3 months to schedule the surgery, to have it and then recover and be able to go back to trying to implant again. So I wake up from surgery, and this is my 4th surgery at this point, 2 extractions, the camera, and now taking out my fallopian tube. And he says it's a success, your right tube is out, but I saw a cyst on your left ovary and it was filling with fluid. So we took a few biopsies. We biopsied that cyst, we biopsy the tube, part of your ovary, and we're going to send it in. But based on what I saw, this is the doctor that did the surgery, who'd never seen me before until this day. He said, I think you have endometriosis. And endometriosis is something that they didn't have a very clear treatment plan for, and from my understanding, it can only be diagnosed surgically. So at this point, let's transition and talk about doctors. You will see your doctor more times than you see some of your boyfriends. And in turn, they will see your vagina more times than some of your boyfriends. And most appointments are quick, but it adds up. Between scheduling and driving time, even a 15-minute appointment, I have spent days of my life in the doctor's office. And again, I love my doctor. She's fantastic. But I got so sick of going into the clinic. You should definitely be proactive about yourself when it comes to doctors. I do believe that doctors are trying to act in your best interests, and they are intelligent and they've studied and they've gone through it, but they're also human beings. So it's good to advocate for yourself and ask questions. You don't want to be there all day asking questions with them, but you do want to make sure that you understand what's happening and that you advocate. And before that surgery, I had actually asked the doctor a couple questions, and one of them was, can you see if I have endometriosis? Because I've read that that can cause fertility issues, and that it can only be diagnosed in surgery. You have to be in there and see it. And I don't know if he would have checked anyway, but I'm glad that I thought and prepared before that surgery to ask those questions. As you're leading up to implanting an embryo, your doctor will want to see you multiple times per week to do blood draws and also, my favorite, vaginal ultrasounds. That's right, ladies. Get ready to be vaginally penetrated 5 to 40 times. For me, this was the worst part. They take a wand the size of a small dildo and larger than some of the men I've had sex with, and they stick it up to look around. And it's not just a slide in and slide out. They have to look around, which means they wiggle it to look at your ovaries and uterus, which can be extremely painful. And for me, my uterus tilts backward towards my back, which makes it even more painful, and particularly if it's someone who's a little less experienced. And since you have to be seen every couple days, it probably won't be your same doctor every time. It's going to be whichever nurse or doctor is on staff that day and works with your schedule. I hope your doctor has a clear process to tell you what medications to take and when, because I definitely got confused. And like I said, at different stages, we tried different cocktails of medications. So it would be like your cycle day 1 to 5, you take medication A, and medication B you take on cycle day 4 to 12, and medication C you take on cycle day 10 to 13, but you have to increase the dose by 50 units every day. And some of these medications are very costly, and so you have to make sure that you order the exact amount for the limited time. And you have to be punctual. Some of the medications have to be taken within 1 hour on a daily basis. Some of them have to be refrigerated. And this can be tough if you're traveling. And if you have to do blood draws every couple days, you might have to cancel travel for a period of time. Sound like enough pain? Nope. This brings us to needles. Better be comfortable with needles. For extracting eggs and implanting embryos, you have to take injections daily, sometimes multiple per day, for weeks. I'll briefly show you what it looked like for me on a typical week leading up to an implant. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, this is not an instructional video. This is just to give you an idea of what one typical woman would go through leading up to implanting an embryo. So I brought out my box of meds, all the medications that I got prescribed to me that I've taken over the last 2 years. So there's 2 medications I have to take tonight and 1 in the morning, and they're both injections, which you do at home. And then other than these, I'll get to those at the end. Over the last couple years, I've had to take S-Trace, this one Femora, this one's a vaginal S-Trace, Medrol, doxycycline hysolate, Vibertab, Provera, Dottie. I think this is the progesterone. These ones are patches that you like put on your skin. And then when we're trying naturally, Clomid. And then there's also Leuprolide and Novarel. So make sure you don't get all of these medications confused or your dosages of them. It's really overwhelming. So now I'll go into what I'm doing tonight. And then it also comes with like syringes and needles. And so sometimes you'll order like 5 meds for your cycle, and it'll come with all of these different packages, and it can be very overwhelming. So the first one I'll do is the Menopur. So this one, you have to mix the medication. People might have done that in the past. Let's see, where are all my needles? So it comes with 2 vials. One of them is the actual medication, and the other one is sodium chloride. It's like a liquid, kind of like water that you mix it with. First, put on a Q-cap onto the sodium chloride. And almost all the patients do this from home. You can have a nurse help you, but it's like that many more times that you have to go into the office. And then there is a syringe that you screw on to the Q-cap, and then you draw up the sodium chloride and keep that plunger in place for when you take it off. Unscrew the Q-cap, open up the Menopur. This is a great place to remind you that I am not a doctor and I have no medical training, and this is just to give you a perspective of one woman's journey through IVF and kind of what it takes and the things I wish I would have known going in. And then so just put the needle on the syringe, and then you puncture the actual medication, put the diluent in, make sure that it is all dissolved. This one dissolves pretty well, but the medication that I take in the morning, there'll be like chunks in there. So if you don't mix it, you might not get the right dosage. So that's like one other thing to be aware of. And then I'm drawing this down. This one is a small needle, thankfully, but that means it takes kind of a while to get all of the medication in. You kind of have to pull the needle out a little bit so that you get it all. Okay, at this point, if you don't like needles, you can skip ahead because I am going to inject this. I do this every night for about a week. And there's one other step, which is sterilizing the area that you're going to inject. So this is an alcohol swab. And then you just stab yourself. So that's one. And then I have a second one that I take every night. And then I've got one that I take in the morning. So this one's a lot easier. That last one was called Menopur. This one's called Gonal. The other tricky thing is there's like multiple companies that make similar medications. So sometimes you've got like multiple names, and it might be like different medications and you only have one of them, or it might be like a generic name as well as like the actual medical name. So this one's a lot easier. It's like pre-filled, and you just get your dose. You like turn the knob until you find your dose. Again, if you don't like needles, if you don't want to see needles, skip ahead a minute. And so I switched sides, and you probably can't see from here, but I've got tons of little injection site dots. And you push down on the plunger and make sure that it gets all the way down to 0. So that's what I do every night. And then, oh, there is one more other important thing, which is make sure the needles go into this syringe disposal container so that we keep all of the trash people safe, so that nobody gets stabbed with a needle. So that's important. I even like recap the needle and then put it on there. So that's what my nightly routine looks like. And I'll do one more in the morning. And every couple days we have the checkup with my doctor, and they might like change the medication. So you constantly need to be in contact with your medical care team so that you make sure you're doing the right dosages. Lastly, money. It's gonna cost you. This varies, so go to at least 1 or maybe up to 5 clinics to get an estimate. For me, I am one of the very privileged and very few women whose employer covers IVF. It's not unlimited. My insurance covers about 2 egg extractions and 6 implants, and I still have to pay my deductible. Here's some things that I do know about billing. Freezing my eggs was $14,000 each time. Storing the embryos was $800 a year, and the drugs are expensive too. After my first failed embryo transfer, I mentioned there was a time when my uterine lining was thin. It wasn't quite as thick as they wanted it to be, and so we canceled the transfer, and I was still billed $1,000 for the office visit and over $2,000 for the medications that I had already taken. So there's $3,000 just down the drain 1 month, and another lost month. So it's not unlikely that you could spend $50,000, 50 hours of your life, and end up with 0 pregnancies. Money part B is insurance. If you're going through insurance, you should know about prior authorization. I had to get permission up front for my treatment, sometimes every cycle, and sometimes for multiple medications in the same cycle. So I mentioned there was one time where we tried, I was prescribed Viagra to insert vaginally to help with blood flow to thicken the lining. And because that was a new medication, my insurance didn't cover it. And of course, my medication cycle started on a Saturday. And so I couldn't even contact, and my pharmacy didn't fill it, so I couldn't even contact insurance until Monday, which almost delayed my cycle. So that's another hiccup to be aware of, is making sure that your insurance has authorized any kind of procedure, doctor visits and all the medications that you're going to be taking within the next month, so it doesn't delay it, or worst case, you just, again, wasted money. After all the pain, time, and money, is it worth it? If you're the wife of a millionaire with no job, go for it. If your company pays for at least half of it, you should seriously consider it. If you're under 30, I would say think about exhausting your other options. Track your ovulation for a year, have sex on the day that you ovulate and then 2 days later. And you can ask your doctor about other options, such as a prescription for Clomid. If you're over 35, you're a geriatric wannabe mama like me, and you're desperate for some procreational peace of mind, IVF just might be worth it. I hope that the information that I've given you and some of the pieces of my experience in what delayed and made it difficult to get to that viable pregnancy help you in deciding if IVF is right for you, and also just getting in the right headspace and knowing just how many hurdles you might have to jump through and how long it might take. It could be years from when you start on the IVF journey to when you finally have that baby in your arms. Good luck, ladies. I hope that your journey ends with you being a mama. Eggs.